Motorcraft Formula Ford 12 lap of the second race of the day. The first ended in a bit of a schmozzle. There's Andy McElrea on pole. Gary Croft behind him in the number 5 car, first season in. That's Mark Pedersen in the Mondial car, which has been really uncompetitive, and he's had to drive round it. Phil Hallebracker's on the outside there. Then Jonathan Harmer, one of the Englishmen, who is contending for the overall points in the championship. The order of qualifying was McElrea, Croft, Pedersen, Hallebrackers, Harmer, Courage, Abbott, Dixon and Barclay. And that name Courage is Jason Courage, who was injured along with one of the Japanese drivers in the earlier Formula Ford race.
First heat won ever so finely by Mark Pedersen over Jonathan Harmer after the big crash caused a big reshuffle. We're about 15 seconds away now from the start. Heat 2, the Motorcraft Championship round. Andy McElrea starts from the pole, leading the championship. Has to hold out Jonathan Harmer and Gary Croft.
Look at them as they get off the line cleanly. Croft on the outside. Andy McElrea gets the line of the first corner. Then Pedersen in third place. Harmer in fourth. Then Hallebrackers. Watch them stream through. Bit of curb bashing there. McElrea concedes. Croft concedes on the outside. Underneath them, Mark Pedersen and Jonathan Harmer got through. And this will be tight, tough and furious up front. McElrea, Pedersen on his tail. Pedersen looking for a gap here. Harmer up behind them. Then Croft. Croft lost out in that first corner. And I must say, since the outset in Invercargill, this has been superb racing as Pedersen takes the lead off McElrea. Big lock-up for Croft there. Big lock-up further back for Nigel Barclay as well in the 17 car. McElrea loses the lead to Pedersen. Harmer in third place, Croft in fourth. Don't expect that to say the same.
Tactically, of course, Pedersen doesn't have a chance in the championship as such. So watching for McElrea and Harmer in second and third places. McElrea's coming back around Pedersen on the outside. Has he got it? He turns in. Yes, he's got it. McElrea pulls back the lead from Pedersen, from Harmer, from Croft, from Abbott. And Hallebrackers drops back to 6th place from that.
Good tight fields and good racing. What normally happens is that the group of 3 or 4 at the front will get a break, and once they make the initial break, they get away from the field. Having a look at a replay of the start, a good clean start. McElrea on the inside, Croft coming across the slot in second, and then Pedersen in third place. But Croft lost out in the next corner here in the little S section. Back with the race leaders. Still a battle between Pedersen and McElrea. Pedersen leads McElrea. Harmer third, Croft fourth.
There's a lot of things hanging on this race. Remember the guy in the third car, Jonathan Harmer, the Englishman out here in one of a team of 6 cars, run from the Manfield organisation. And if he wins this race and beats McElrea for the championship, he stands in line for a very important drive in Europe. So it means more to Harmer than for, say, McElrea. But McElrea, been around for a couple of years, he wants to nail his name on the championship title. But Mark Pedersen feels cheated this year. He's been running this car and having bad luck with an uncompetitive, or what was considered to be an uncompetitive car. He's leading this race in terms of Formula Ford. He's got a comfortable lead now, at least 3 lengths. And Harmer moves up to second. He takes second place off McElrea.
Bear in mind that McElrea had an enormous shunt in an earlier race today, and they've done some rebuilding on the car, so it may not be perfect in its setup. You wouldn't expect McElrea under normal circumstances to get past that easily. So well, Mark Pedersen leads the race. Jonathan Harmer in second place. McElrea back to third, and then Gary Croft. In fact, Croft has gone by McElrea.
This is a real knock for McElrea. Remember, it's the number of cars between he and Harmer that's crucial to his championship chances. Harmer is trying on the outside for Pedersen. Pedersen holds him out. Harmer is doing extremely well. He hasn't been round as long. Croft makes a bad line. He misses the apex of the turn altogether, and that really has destroyed his chances. Helps McElrea, though. McElrea now back into third place behind Harmer.
But this young guy, Mark Pedersen, who has been around motorsport and since he was 4 years old, and whose dad, of course, Gary Pedersen, has been involved for half a lifetime. He came through the karting, having a look at the overtaking there, the attempt by Jonathan Harmer on the outside. Look at this incident in the S section there. Gary Croft just not able to make the corner straight ahead and comes back on again. He might get his hand slapped for coming back on where he did, although he didn't appear to impede anyone's progress.
Harmer's trying on the inside of Pedersen. Has he got it? He has. As he comes in to start the 4th lap, he's taken the lead off Pedersen. Now, this is a problem for McElrea, because if Pedersen holds up McElrea, that margin, which is important, Pedersen's down the outside. Very risky place to pass on the outside, down the outside of champion there. It's very slippery on the marbles. So we've got Harmer out in the front now in a Van Diemen, a 1990 model Van Diemen, what used to be the top car under threat a bit this year. But Pedersen's having a go at him in the Mondial, all the way from Ireland, this car. Not a very fashionable car, but he's saying, who cares? I'm going to have a go and try and win this race with it. He grabs the lead back.
This really is superb driving from Mark Pedersen from the outset in Invercargill in the first round. The car was considered to be uncompetitive. It is certainly not as good in its setup. It is not as competitive as, for example, the brand new Van Diemen that Jonathan Harmer is running in 2nd place. Part of it is circuit knowledge and part of it is just sheer driving ability.
Harmer moving out for a position, but he won't be able to do it there. He'd be trying to position himself and put Pedersen under pressure as he goes into the S-bend, try and make Pedersen's line less than acceptable for the long haul up the back. But Pedersen's got a good line in the shell car. McElrea went a little bit wide, got his wheel out on the ripple strip and lost a bit of momentum. But the slipstreaming is so important in this class as much as in Mini 7. But the top guys haven't really got an answer for why Mark Pedersen is going so well. He's finally come right with this car. He was winning races here 2 years ago in his first year of the class. Harmer pulls that place back. And McElrea looking for a gap.
I noticed Pedersen looking round to see where McElrea was there and give him space. There's this good, clean driving, and to me, the feature of Formula 4 throughout this season has been that the racing is so tight and yet so clean. As Jonathan Harmer said to me very early in the series, and Jason Courage, in England it is not always that clean. There's too much money at stake, and often it comes down to dirty races. Here these guys can race wheel to wheel as they're doing now. Pedersen around the outside! No! Oh, wrong place to do it. He's taken McElrea out as well.
Well, that has given the championship to Jonathan Harmer. I must say now, McElrea has lost the place. He had nowhere to go. It was an opportunist move. It had to be tried, I guess, but there will be... Let's look at the replay in due course, but I'm sure what has happened is he's come in and tossed across the front of Harmer, cut it too fine. Harmer has just not backed off, said, why should I? And, hey, away they go.
The interesting thing now is that Gary Croft is back up in 2nd place, and Hallebrack is behind him in 3rd.
Let's watch the replay. Well, who will you believe? I'm sure that'll be argued for many a year, but it was really close for the crashing and bashing department.
So Jonathan Harmer, the Englishman now, who has a chance of taking out this championship, is being challenged only by Gary Croft. Hallebrack is behind him, and then Campbell. And McElrea's making up the places, but he's got a lot of space to make up and not many laps left to do it.
Well, we're about half distance in this Ford Motorcraft round, the final round for the New Zealand section of the, what we'll call the international section of the championship. And it's down to what might be concerned a grudge match. During the season, there's been a bit of conflict about engine eligibility, and there's been a bit of contention about things. They've got it all sorted out for this race, and it comes down to now a battle between Gary Croft, who's been a pacemaker all season, and Jonathan Harmer, who's the English newcomer who's come in to learn the craft in New Zealand and the tracks, and he's done a damn good job of it.
And that car that Gary Croft and the lead is driving is Paul Larson's car from last year, and Larson, as motorsport fans will know, absolutely dominated the series. He did an awful lot of testing early on, but we know it's a quick car. And now this is going to help McElrea because he's holding Harmer up, driving defensive lines, having got in front. Hallebrack is in third still, and McElrea able to close slightly, but he's still got a big gap there. The more that these two dice in front, the better off he's going to be.
Well, before this round, the lead was 221 for McElrea over 207 to Harmer. So that's 14 points the difference. Remember, he had 14 points advantage going into this race. So
that was, of course, after all the points from Bay Park were discounted because of the controversy and the protest that went on there. Harmer having another go. Hallebrack is staying with the three of them. Harmer's looking for the line, looking for it into the next goal. Lock up from Gary Croft. Ended up forcing Harmer just a little bit wide, and Croft hangs on to it. Just hanging on to it. And you get the impression that this dice up front is going to help McElrea if he's got enough time.
Well, the way I see it, Tony, there's 14 points the difference in these cars. Harmer, if he's in this place at the finish, is going to get 15. So somewhere in there, McElrea only has to get better than one to actually beat him in the series. So, I don't know. That's the way it looks unofficially. At the moment, Gary Croft says, to hell with that. I'm going to get this Pedersen Motorsport car. And the Ubix people, I want them up on the dials at the end of the race. And he's giving it everything. He's 39 years old. He's in his first year in Formula Ford and doing a great job. Out of calf.
There are lots of experienced observers. In fact, Marcus Pye, the editor of Autosport, made the point that to see a 39-year-old guy come into Formula Ford, which is a young man's learning formula, first year up, and be able to win is just phenomenal.
I think this age thing has been laboured too much. It really boils down to how much you want to do something, and I thought that in this, Gary Croft wanted to do it too much. But he managed to bluff the corner out of Jonathan Harmer's hands, and a bit of a breakdown on the outside of the circuit there. I don't think it's a problem. So Croft, he's got the lead still. Must be three-quarters distance now. And Harmer, it's really crucial for these guys where they place themselves on the last lap. They must be inch perfect on their lines so that when they go down the back straightaway, that they get their slipstreaming dead right. Not just to pull alongside, but to pull out past and pull back in front. It's so crucial. After what we saw with Mark Pedersen, I guess there'll be various ways of looking at it. I would say he pulled over a little bit too soon, and maybe Harmer just said, I'm not going to let you through that way, Kiwi, and that's what's happened. We've lost Pedersen.
So Croft and Harmer continue to battle it out as they go along to the end of the back straight. McElrea still holds third place, and Chris Abbott holds fourth.
The sleeper in this picture is Phil Hallebrack, is in one of last year's Swift cars, the car that was a very gaudily coloured car, but this year Aztec colour makes it look a little more international. And the Harmer car always trying another line up the inside, keeping pressure on Harmer. This car is probably the most successful of the team of five that came out here. Is this the flag lap now? I see the TV crew joining up, getting ready for the start-finish. So I've been watching now for the positioning antics. Gary Croft got robbed of a place last week, he maintains, or 2 weeks ago at Manfield when he left the gap in a corner just like that. And so he'll be watching his mirrors, but trying to get the most power. Look at that line. They run as one car. They look like one car. 12 wheels in line. But wait till the pull-out. Harmer will go to the left. Will he be able to get round the outside and pull back? No, he can't.
Hallebrack is still sitting there in third place. He has a little dab. And McElrea still fourth. And Abbott still fifth. But McElrea is getting in touch. He just hasn't got enough time left. And now it's almost going around. Hallebrack is taking the place off Harmer. Nicely stolen.
And McElrea's in fourth position.
So McElrea closing up that gap all the time. But as they come round, he's running out of laps to do it in. These three dicing in front. Give him some time to get back there. Checkered flag coming out as they come down, and Gary Croft is going to take it. Hallebrack in second, Jonathan Harmer third, and Andy McElrea will finish fourth, and that is going to be enough for him.
Well, the Kiwis couldn't have asked for much more. And then again, Harmer's team gave him everything, and he gave it everything. But in the end, Gary Croft is your winner. From Phil Hallibreakers in second place, Jonathan Harmer in third, and Andy McElroy, the champion-elect, in fourth place.
The Hansel Sun Valley Trans Am, 8th lap of the second race of the day. In the first, Kane Scott got off to a magnificent start and broke the lap record, went under the magic minute barrier. 57.8, he's got a clean start again, he's away. But look at that race between he and Karen Wills into the first corner. Don Grindley on the inside as they go round and through to Castrol. Kane Scott should be able to run away, but that's a good move from Grindley down the inside on Karen Wills. Roger Frieden in fourth. Greg Lancaster moving up. He's improved on the grid. Behind him, Grant Brennan. And down the back straight toward that hairpin, Karen Wills moving up on Grindley. Have a look at them under brakes. This will be a good battle between these two as Wills goes around the outside. Is he going to get the line there? Grindley concedes and Wills is back to second place. And it's tight in the front. Kane Scott not being able to get away with a break this time.
Well, it almost looks like Karen Wills has found another 100 horsepower. The way he streaked by the Oldsmobile Cutlass of Don Grindley. Kane Scott pokes it down the front straight now off the mountain. And clears away.
And now he starts to pull his lead, Kane Scott. In the 2.5-litre Ford Sierra, a turbocharged car with 650-odd horsepower is going magnificently. Karen Wills, as David has said, has found a heap of extra horsepower, and he's in front of Grindley, overtaking him on the first lap at the end of the straight. And the spaces start to get pulled a little wider now down the back as Kane Scott leaps away in the lead. Looking at the start again, good and clean for everyone. Scott on the inside, Wills on the outside, and Grindley just poking through there as Wills went wide through champion. The ground was made up again. Back with the leader, Kane Scott. Wills trying to keep him honest in the early laps anyway, but it looks as though Kane Scott will be able to pull away again. Coming round to complete the second now. Kane Scott in the lead by a substantial margin now over Karen Wills and starting to pull away a little as they go into Castrol for the third time. Looking back through the order, this man, Kane Scott, in the Ford 2.5-litre Cosworth Sierra, is in the lead of the race by a good margin now from Kieran Wills in the RX-8, the V8-powered RX-7. In third place, the Oldsmobile Cutlass there of Don Grindley. Back in fourth place is Roger Frieden in the 4-litre V8-powered Toyota Starlet. Grant Brennan in the V8 RX-7 is behind him. Roger Frieden in the Castrol CRC Starlet.
Tony, that car used to be a winning car. We've known and talked about this Road Rocket, this little Toyota Starlet, but just now you seem to have a supercar to win in this category. Roger Frieden just hasn't got any answer for these guys. He's running in third place in the championship, but he just hasn't got an answer for the top men.
Certainly not at Pukekohe, where horsepower does count. And looking at the leaders, what it's being beaten by is the imported technology. Frieden's car is a monocoque, production-based car, whereas these cars, Kane Scott Sierra, and the car in third place, Don Grindley's Oldsmobile Cutlass, are purpose-built, imported, space-framed Trans Am cars. And we'll have a look at what exactly a Trans Am car is as opposed to a road-based car.
Trans Am car is a hybrid car, very high horsepower, and they basically have no constraints. 17-inch tyres, as you see here. Very high performance engine, 600 horsepower out of this Ford Pinto. Absolute superiority with electronics and no limits contained in the car.
And Kane, it doesn't have a normal monocoque frame like a road car.
No, Tony, this is a space frame vehicle. It's built from a series of tubes welded together. Chrome molding, in fact, this car. It helps us get the dead right geometry for steering, cornering, and of course the right places for tyres and braking to be fitted to the car.
Now, Kane, you're obviously almost sitting in the back seat, and nothing in this car resembles a road car.
No, it doesn't, Tony. It's quite different from the standard Ford Sierras. All the weight in this car we've tried to move as far back as possible, which is the reason for the seat so far back. The tank you see inside, there's the dry sumped oil tank. We've moved as much fluid as we can right back in the car.
And very sophisticated electronics?
Very, very sophisticated. The car is as tunable as well as anything that we've ever driven. Well, fuel pressure is very important for this particular vehicle. Obviously, the tank limits the amount of fuel going to the brain here for the electronics. Very sophisticated. Also, it's the high impact. It's got a large bladder inside the fuel tank in case of any collision.
Last question, is it a nice car to drive?
It's a fantastic car to drive. This is the Mark Petch Ford Sierra entry, and it's a great car to drive.
So, Tony, I guess today you just can't run a big V8 engine in the back of a Cortina or the front of a Cortina the way the Rob McElrays used to run, the Oscar cars, the old all-comers as we know it. It's really got into a high-tech class, and you've got to have something fancy.
And the good thing for the purists is that it is not just horsepower. The reason why this car is so quick, and Don Gridley's car capable of being so quick, is the chassis, the way they handle. And that's indicated in the lap times. 58.7, the new lap record, and that would have put them about 4th or 5th on a Formula Pacific car grid. Their terminal speed at the end of the straight is considerably more than a Pacific car, and the handling improvements are coming up so well with cars like this one, like the RX-8 as they call it, an RX-7 with a V8 in it. Beautifully built, very adjustable suspension, good chassis, they point in well, they go through fast corners well, and that's what's pulling up their times.
I read the specifications for this car last week, Tony, and it's full of the most trick stuff in the world. It's got quick change differentials and all stuff out of sprint cars, as they're called in the States, and all you petrol heads know what I mean. They're the real gun horsepower cars that are just made for the dirt, bulletproof stuff, which goes very, very fast for quite a long time. We've finished are the days, as I said earlier, finished with the days where these cars are hand grenades. They're rocket ships.
So Kieran Wills, the championship leader, the battle has been with Kane Scott. Only 5 points in the championship.
Five laps down in this Hansel Sun Valley Championship round, the second of 3 today, and as they went into this race today, 5 points lead to Kieran Wills on the screen now over Kane Scott in the Sierra car, and that lead could evaporate today. Remember, right now, in fact, because remember 2015-12, the points were awarded system for this category of car. So 20 if Kane Scott were to pick up today in this heat would make it equal going into the final round today.
Which sets up beautifully for the flying farewell, as they normally call the last big saloon car race of the day at a meeting. They've had 3 at each meeting, short races, and certainly they still bring the crowds alive. I would like to have seen bigger fields for them, but the technology is such and the expense is such that you really, I guess, can't expect to get 30 or 40 cars on a grid of that standard.
I think we're in between things, so to speak, Tony. What's happened here is that we saw a pretty trick car come out last year in the hands of Steve Diamond. There's a lap ball going out at 64.4, so the pace is a little bit slower now. But Steve Diamond brought out a pretty trick car from the States last year. It was the subject of a lot of controversy, whatever you like to call it, and it made the guys in the category think, what do we want from this thing? So they sat down, they thought about the rules, they thought about the intonation stuff, the South Island versus the North, and they came up with TranzAms, and got together with the Hansel's people, put together a neat series, and this is the rules now which will be around for quite some time. So I'm sure that Kane Scott loves the way it is. The way we look at it, he's coming up for a final lap now.
There's a lot of people around who are somewhat jealous of Kane Scott's drives and who are saying that he's only where he is because somebody's put big dollars behind him. Well, I can tell you for sure, somebody put big dollars behind him because of this. He wins races, and he did his apprenticeship in saloon cars, and he worked hard, and he did it with inferior machinery and proved that he could drive. And he takes the race out from Kieran Wills and Don Gridley again. And Kane Scott now equal in the championship in the lead with Kieran Wills. There's the result confirmed in the Hansel Sun Valley TranzAms, the second of 3 races for the day. Kane Scott In the Sierra, Kieran Wills in second place, and Don Grindley, and that means that...
There really has been some wild competition in this year's Peter Jackson International Motor Racing Series. And congratulations to Peter Jackson International Series winner, Craig Baird.
He was slightly ahead of Keith Sharp in an M3 and Brett Riley in another M3. And we would expect that at Pukekohe, being a horsepower circuit, that Kane Scott and the Sierra, the first couple of laps, will be able to pull a break on the rest of this group. The first of the Group N cars, those are the unmodified production saloons. David Slater in the Sierra Sapphire Cosworth, number 1, and John Sachs in the red BMW M3, car 56.
Slater's pulled a gap there on John Sachs back in the field. So this is the car that leads the race, of course, the Group A car. And, of course, none other than Kane Scott. More used to seeing this young man in the flying Ford Sierra, the Shell Sierra, the TranzAms. It seems he's the man of the moment. He is actually leading both categories of saloon cars today. And at this point, pulling away, inching away from Brett Riley in the fabulous little BM3.
I tell you what, David, Kane Scott's going to have some confidence as a few of them go out, a little motocrossing there. Kane Scott is certainly going to have some confidence because just a little while ago in the first of the Trans Am races, he set a new lap record of 58.72, which is phenomenally fast. Would have put him halfway up the grid in a Formula Pacific race. So he's in touch with the circuit today, and all of the race miles will help his effort. And the Sierra Cosworth in Group A form is ideally suited to the Pukekohe circuit with that long back straight where he can wind it up the long legs and get away from this group. So I think on form you'd have to say it's a Kane Scott benefit, and the battle will be between the two M3s, Keith Sharp and Brett Riley.
Dave Barrow bringing up third place as we watch the replay of the start. Brett Riley there from Dave Barrow, Keith Sharp, David Slater in fifth spot. A great start there from David Slater in the Ford Sierra Sapphire. But Kane Scott there, quite in control. Realistically, Brett Riley can't hope to run with this car. He'll do a great job, but we know this to be more of a, what we would call a street circuit car, the BMW M3. Never shown its, what should we say, outright speed to run with the turbocharged Ford Sierras at this circuit.
We actually have the same thing each year in the Nissan Mobile for the last couple of years. You get to Wellington with tight and twisty streets. The M3 is a match in an endurance race for Sierra, but on a circuit like Pukie, where it is really two straights joined by a couple of corners, the Sierra has the legs by a long way.
Kane Scott, he always seems to be able to drive a nice line, but still be good to the car.
Flash of John Sachs there going through frame. Almost about to be lapped by Kane Scott, which is an indication of the difference between the Group A and the Group N cars in competitive form. The only one of the Group N cars really that is in the hunt is David Slater in the Sierra Sapphire. So one more to go now for Kane Scott as he gets through the S section approaching Castrol and in the midst of quite a lot of traffic. As I said, though, it is not going to bother him greatly. His lead is such that the odd half-second loss here or there, and he gets the indicator of which side to go by. The odd little bit of time lost is not going to make any difference. He just pulls away from the rest of the field like they're standing still in the back straight. And interestingly enough, going by John Sachs, who is second in the Group N section of the race and being lapped inside 10 laps. So when people look at Group A cars as they race in the likes of the Nissan Mobile Road Race, there's an indication of how much faster they are than the normal standard production version of the same car. Well, our lap chart says they've done 10. No checkered flag out, so obviously they're going to do another. This may be a result of the fact that a race earlier in the day didn't happen. Because of a delay after a couple of crashes, they missed their earlier race. And it is possible that they have extended this in compensation.
Dave Barrow and Keith Sharp, the BMW, having a great race for third and fourth spot now. Long way behind Kane Scott, your race leader in the Shell Ford Sierra. So Kane Scott approaching the mountain, the big hill for the last time. Checkered flag in the starter's hands.
And coming out this time, the checkered flag for Kane Scott in the Sierra Cosworth. The Group A car, and there's a big gap back now to Barrow and Riley. The Commodore versus the M3. Coming down to take the checkered flag in second place, Brett Riley in the M3. And Dave Barrow will be third. That's the Group A section. So there's the result confirmed. Kane Scott in the Cosworth Sierra, winning by a country mile, really, over Brett Riley in the BMW M3. Dave Barrow in the Commodore in third. And first in Group N, Nigel Arkell driving David Slater's Cosworth Sapphire Sierra.
We're very good there. I'm a lot more competitive than we have been here, and this has probably been the slowest I've ever been around Wigram.
Ross Cheever, the young 20-year-old American who has been an F3, as has his teammate Davy Jones this year. That's second place. A little nudge from Kenny Smith from Jeff MacPherson. Kenny Smith a lap down, Jeff MacPherson in second place.
This, of course, has the possible chance of elevating young Steve Cameron from New Zealand to second overall on the day. Now that is a fantastic performance. Just to think that young Steve Cameron, car number 4, would be, well, beyond his wildest hopes, I would think. Certainly he has obviously a following of his close friends from around Papakura up near Auckland, and who believed that one day he'd make it, and to come home and run second overall, it's fantastic. Now Jeff MacPherson here, we haven't seen too much of him or heard of him in New Zealand before. In fact, Steve Cameron, now coming with your picture, as I said before, one of the big surprises and the revelations, the finds of the series so far, young Steve Cameron. Just going to that story of Dave McMillan's about the bearing tightening in his engine, I know from the experience of the feeling he's talking about, and you try and imagine that you're traveling at a speed of something like, for kilometre fans, say 220, 240 kilometres an hour in a car that weighs something like 500 Ks, and suddenly you feel like the wind has just got a little bit stronger as it's pushing you along, as you're running into the wind, shall I say. So you feel a slight hesitation. You only get a moment, I mean a fraction of a second, to look at the oil pressure gauge and see if there's any variation. And that can be the difference between completely destroying an engine and switching it off and saving it in time. And I suspect that's what Dave's done. He knows that every time he loses a crankshaft or a bearing or a rod, it's thousands and thousands of dollars. It's just not worth the risk. You might as well head for the pit and hope that you've stopped everything just in time.
As we're watching there, with Steve Cameron doing exceptionally well, we've got Charlie O'Brien right behind him in the other role, and not far behind him in a performance that may surprise a few people is Peter Haskett's.
Peter Haskett has improved immensely since last season, or should we say earlier this year, which was last season.
He's got a very old model Chevron there. He's a very determined driver and has always been aggressive and come under the much sort of problems with stewards.
Well, that's a pretty impressive performance to actually pass an RT4.
Yes.
And he's actually keeping the passing with him. That was very good, Peter. Excellent bit of driving.
Yeah, I mean,
Charlie has a reputation of being fairly hard to get past.
He came into control tower. It was a very brave thing that he did there as well. So full marks to him. It's a difficult part of the circuit with all the bumps and that in it to get around and without spinning. Excellent.
For this fellow who, as we said earlier, has managed to only spin 3 laps of practice before he fell over a bunch of tyres and caused the mechanics a lot of overnight work.
he's actually just gone out and is winning this race as he likes. It's just no competition for him at all.
So Ross Cheever in the John Brandon #2 car, taking over and doing the job after the #1 driver Davy Jones in the #1 car had to call it a day in the pits. His race is over. Kenny Smith is out of contention, a lap down, but still in the points. Dave McMillan out of the race. The attrition rate has been quite drastic, really.
Well, I suppose we have to start asking the question that we can't answer. Does Cheever have a problem? Remember, we heard that in the first heat, both he and Jones complained of gear selection troubles, and it doesn't take much going wrong inside the car to actually start losing you a second a lap. And when you've got someone as hungry as MacPherson, not that far behind, you can find that margin of advantage get just erodes away. So what have we got? We've got Ross Cheever looking across there just to see how close, in fact, Jeff MacPherson is, and he is close. There's no doubt about it.
Definitely closing in every lap. Every corner he's closing in. He's just, I think he's actually, if you look at his driving style, he's using all the road, the grass verges and everything. MacPherson is extremely aggressive at the moment.
4 laps to go, and if Jeff MacPherson can catch Cheever, it looks as though he's capable of doing so. He is picking up time. He's only got 4 laps to do it in.
Heath. So it's certainly well within MacPherson's interest to close in and take this lead, because he will be told by Alan McCall, his team manager, go for it. Alan McCall is quite used to winning at the circuit, having brought Tom Gloy down here in 1976, when in fact Alan and Tom Gloy beat the now or since world champion Keiko Rosberg. And at that stage Alan ran the Tui. Now he's joined forces with Ralk cars like most of the successful competitors, and this is the result. Jeff MacPherson, 2nd place overall, and running very hard to try and take first.
At the moment is dropping back, so I don't think he's going to close in on Ross Cheever. Ross Cheever appears to be pulling away at the moment. MacPherson may have settled for 2nd position, and Steve Cameron should still be holding on for 3rd position, and he should will give him 2nd points overall for the day, and he'll be very happy because he's going to be the first New Zealander, David, something that you've been many times before, and for Steve Cameron to come back here first on RT4 to be the first New Zealander overall in the Lady Wigram event is a tremendous achievement.
Well, it's a fickle sport, as we know, and sometimes you can lead a race almost until the last flag, and as they say, it's never over until the flag drops. No one knows that better than I or Reg, and it certainly looks at the moment as if Cheever has got it a bit easier. Yes, MacPherson not as close as he was the lap before.
Cheever still in first, circulating. Nope, doesn't appear to have any problems.
Cheever's back on his 111s.
Kenny Smith has dropped back a little bit in his relative position, so I mean, he's not prepared to throw away the use of the car and wear it out. Steve Cameron, we're looking for, yes, Steve Cameron still running in his 3rd position. No real pressure from either side, none that he can immediately wrestle with in front, and none immediately behind. Well, not the race result we were hoping for. We certainly were looking for Kenny Smith and Dave McMillan to come out.
American and New Zealander, I mean, you know,
yes,
2 Americans and a New Zealander, I mean, it's still pretty good.
Steve Cameron, as we said, the true Kiwi way of doing it, going away, working with this American team, the Rick Shea team. Now here's the checkered flag being held by the flag marshal. Yes, Ross Cheever about to take the flag to win the 2nd heat of the Lady Wigram Trophy race, and of course the overall point structure.
Well, Ross, you seem to have a pretty untroubled win there to take the event.
Lucky.
You reckon it was just luck?
Yeah, Davey went out and Kenny Smith went out. It was just luck. It's motor racing, you know. I mean, Friday was, you know, I had bad luck. Well, it wasn't bad luck. I drove bad Friday or Saturday morning, and today was just lucky. Next weekend, it could all be different. I mean, that's motor racing, you know.
Well, it's a bit difficult to say, you know. When we were here on Saturday, Ross he only got about 15 minutes to learn the track, and he wasn't out until the first leg this morning, where I had a full day yesterday. But you know, in this 2nd leg, he was turning times that were pretty impressive, and most of the laps were quicker than what I qualified. So, you know, I know that it was a bit unfortunate what happened to myself, and otherwise it might have been a good race. But I know Ross is going to be very competitive next weekend, and I think, you know, just keep your eyes tuned into TV New Zealand and see what happens.
Well, Kenny, that pit stop no doubt cost you some valuable points and perhaps even the race. Do you feel bitter and twisted about what happened?
No, that's what happens in motor racing. The start, a marker cone hit which bent the wing, car understeered bad, and then we had to use the inside of the corners to get round into the back straight and clipped a curve and did the third wheel for the weekend. And but even when we went out, fourth gear had gone in the car, so we had massive problems.
Smith a little out of luck. Meantime, the top Kiwi is Steve Cameron. Although entered as an American, he's a Kiwi.
Well, Steve, as the top place Kiwi, you should be feeling pretty happy, but you don't look as happy as I thought you would. You had a few problems during the event.
Yeah, we weren't quite as fast in the second race as we were in the first. I was having gear change problems, kept jumping out and got a big blister. And we made some change on the engines which didn't really work, so it wasn't quite as good as I'd hoped for.
What sort of things did you do to the engine?
We put a different set of carburetors on and trumpets, and it just seemed to flatten the motor out at high revs. So, you know, it's such a big open space here that if you're losing a little bit of power, you really notice it.
This was being led by American Ross Cheever, but his teammate American Davy Jones was keen to take that off him.
It is important. Last week we were unlucky on what happened down at Wigram, and I thought that I would have gotten 20 points for the first race win, but as it doesn't work out that way, they take an raw position, and I finished 5th, so I only got 8 points, where Ross has a big advantage with 20 points. But if I do well today and get it first overall, then I'll be right back up in competition.
Second in the series was Kiwi veteran Kenny Smith, who felt that Jones's newer Ralt RT4 would probably be quicker than his around Manfield.
Davy's going to be very hard to knock off because he is quick. Ross Cheever, he's on the pace, and he's, you know, I'm going to have my work cut out with him hanging in there if he doesn't blow me off the start. But I can certainly say I'll be trying.
And Cheever was very aware that he was regarded as the man to beat.
Well, it's pretty important not only to win, but to get some points. I mean, I just have to play it by ear and see how we go. I hopefully like to win, but, you know, just play it by ear.
It was expected, as the cars rolled out for their warm-up lap, that it would be a close race. But from the start, it was Jones who leapt into the lead from pole position, and that was the lead he was to hold until the end. Cheever slid off into the outfield on the first corner, but was able to rejoin the rest of the pack as the cars went into the S's. But he was at the tail of the field. Jones continued to pull away, but suddenly New Zealander Brett Riley was off. At the quarter distance, it was obvious that only something like mechanical failure would put Jones out. Smith was content to sit in third place. The main interest was the battle for third between Cheever, New Zealand's Dave McMillan, and American Jeff MacPherson. This continued for several laps on a very slippery circuit that saw several competitors come to grief. None of the dicing trio was giving the other any quarter, but it came to an end when Dave McMillan went off, one of 2 mishaps he was to suffer in this race. So the race ended with Jones a comfortable 12 seconds in front of Ken Smith. Cheever came home third, about 30 seconds behind the leader.
It's a beautiful day here at Pukekohe. We had torrential rain overnight, but it has cleared up, and we're hoping it'll stay fine tomorrow as well. The moment from here, just as I speak to you, is that Davy Jones, the outright favourite for the Grand Prix, has just gone under David Oxton's lap record of 57.52. He's just done 57.37. We'll be back later in the afternoon. Welcome back to Pukekohe, where we're looking at cars this time in preview for the 32nd New Zealand Grand Prix tomorrow. We'll give you the quickest times that we have from the first practice session earlier in the day. They're on the second now, and Davy Jones, as everybody expected, was the quickest qualifier in the early session, and he went under the lap record, which is David Oxton's lap record of 57.57. He's gone 57.37. The next best is Ross Cheever, his teammate, with 58.01. And then we have a whole gaggle of people in the 58s. Dave McMillan, 58.13. Jeff MacPherson, 58.2. Brett Riley, 58.32. Kenny Smith has improved his morning time a few seconds ago, I've just heard, from 58.39 to 58.37. Still in the 58s, we have Steve Cameron at 58.6 and Charlie O'Brien at 58.89.
He's on course to have a crack at the record tomorrow.
Davy Jones. Sitting in the pits.
a more mature young man than he was when he came in that race between David Oxton and Ken Smith and Davy Jones. This time it looks as though the John Brandon team may end up going out there and ending 1-2. Try and listen in to their pit conversation.
We'll give him a look. You want to leave the rear wing as it is? Just to try.
Hey, Terry, do you want to give us a guess?
Davy's just been recorded unofficially at a 57.72, so that shows that he's on the pace again in the second session, which traditionally doesn't allow the cars to go as fast as the morning session. The heat now is likely to make a bit of an effect on the tyres and the performance of the engines. Drivers usually go out for 5 or 10 laps, then return to the pits, reset their tyre pressures, and then hook up their pants a bit tighter and really go for a lap.
This is Ross Cheever, Davy Jones' teammate in the John Brandon team. They are the fastest 2 qualifiers so far. And Reg Cook, it looks like we've got a motor race.
New Zealand is not far away, so tomorrow we should have a very competitive motor race between the overseas stars and the New Zealand people that it look like they could possibly top them off.
Actually, looking at the New Zealanders, when we look at this field, everybody's talking about Davy Jones and Ross Cheever, the Americans. But the 2 New Zealanders who have qualified very well, Ken Smith we know to be competitive. Dave McMillan is the surprise, David Oxton, in that he has been quite uncompetitive at Wigram and at Manfield, and now a new engine, and he's going well.
My favourite will be Kenny Smith, out to have a go at anyone who wants to race with him.
That's Brett Riley in your picture at the moment, who qualified 5th fastest with 58.32. The order is Davy Jones, Ross Cheever, Dave McMillan, the best of the New Zealanders, in 3rd place, then Jeff MacPherson, then Brett Riley, whom we're going to claim as a New Zealander. We've decided with Ross Cameron and Brett Riley that despite having lived overseas, we'll claim them as New Zealanders, particularly if they're going well. Brett Riley, who has never seen this circuit before, and unlike Davy Jones, hasn't got as quickly onto the pace. It's a car that is familiar to New Zealanders that had a crash on about the 3rd or 4th lap of the first race of the series last year at Bay Park.
When Eric Morgan had this accident, there was a confrontation in the pits afterwards because they said that Graham Watson had pushed him off, and it was a great tragedy to see a young man of his calibre to go out. But the car was rebuilt, and Eric got going again, and here we see it.
That's fully expected, I think, isn't it?
Well, interestingly enough, I think that maybe Reg will agree at this point, a time of 58.2 is probably equivalent to, say, a 58.0 this morning, because it is harder now to do the times. So the challenge is really out for these fellows who are between, say, 58.0 and 58.3. That's only 0.3 of a second. But that margin might be enough to be the difference between 2nd or 6th on the grid. It's going to be hard. So the challenge is out amongst these blokes.
But often is slower in the second practice session, so for anybody who's never been to New Zealand before, it pays to qualify very well in the first session if you can.
That's Ross Cheever in the pits.
I make a point here. There's absolutely no truth in the rumour that the race will start on lap 2 for Eddie Cheever. There was some suggestion we should start on lap 2 because he has so much trouble in getting around lap 1. But he hasn't had the racing experience, and we can't expect that much from Ross yet.
This is Jeff MacPherson, a man who surprised many of us. We had heard that he was quick, but at Wigram we saw just how fast he was. He's the 4th fastest qualifier with 58.20. He hasn't improved on it so far in this session, but still 4th fastest. That's a handy place.
He's doing exceptionally well because the first 2 qualifiers, and Davy Jones and Ross Cheever, are with the Works Roll team led by Graham Watson from Australia. And for the other people to go quite as quick as them, they can do it. They're all sort of standard production cars, as we really led to believe from the factory. But there is differences, and the people in the Works team have got the advantages that Jeff MacPherson doesn't have.
Let's not be fooled. Practice is just that. Here's Davy Jones, the man we're talking about. Now, he's probably done 2 sessions. He'll get down there with Kevin as mechanic, and they'll talk about whether they should lower the wing a bit or whether the temperatures are running about 18 degrees Celsius. It's just an informal chit-chat because there's no urgency about the stop. He knows he's got the pole. No one's going to go quicker. Now he'll be trying to make a nice racing car for the race so that it's nice for him to drive in competition. That may be totally different from the car that was necessary to get pole position. So we'll be just talking about, can I have the wing up a little bit without losing any speed? Can I have maybe a little bit of towing to make it turn in nicer, or something of that effect? all a bit technical, but this is where the real work is done.
Being fair about lap records, it's not very often that we break lap records at the Grand Prix meeting, because usually the circuit's hot and there's so many formula here and racing and oil on the road, rubber and oil on the road, that it isn't very often we see cars going this fast at the Grand Prix meeting.
Now we're just having a good look at the 1984 model RT4 front suspension, and for those keen people, this reveals what we call the pushrod suspension, and that is the one of the lengths in the front suspension that runs at the opposite angle to the other two. It operates the shock absorbers through a little cantilever, and this is the single most varied modification to the new model Ralphs. It appears as if it's working quite well, because it appears that Davy Jones is able to make it go faster than he's been here before.
Just while we've got a moment, I have just heard, I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not, so don't treat this as official, but I think that our own Dave McMillan has just got, yes, Dave McMillan has just gone to second place in front of Ross Cheever. He's just posted a 57.85, improving his 58.13 this morning. That is an excellent time for Dave McMillan. And as David Oxton was saying earlier on, Dave McMillan is probably the fastest man ever in a Pacific car around this circuit. And obviously his motor problems are sorted.
Just you'll notice that all the drivers are trying very, very hard.
That's Dave McMillan, the man who has just gone up to second place on the grid with a 57.85. At a superb time, that is, for the afternoon. Lap times sitting up there. Charlie O'Brien, 58.48. Ken Smith, 58.37. Riley Hopkins, 60.4. Having a little trouble getting on the pace here. Might be different in the race tomorrow. Dave McMillan, 57.85. And as we said, that puts him up right behind Davy Jones, who was under the lap record with a 57.37.
Well, he'll be very pleased with that, because I spoke to him before the second session, and he said to me, I don't think this is a 57 material car. He just didn't think he had enough power in the engine, even though it's a freshly rebuilt unit. He didn't believe it was crisp enough to get it to 57, so he'll be very pleased.
Speaking of engines, that's something that the John Brandon team will know all about, and their engine builder, Randall Edgell, will know all about. They were up until 4 o'clock this morning rebuilding Davy Jones because they lost oil pressure yesterday. As far as I know, they put a new crankshaft in and rebuilt it. Now, that's their third engine, and I gather Ross Cheever has done a couple as well.
Unlike your road cars, it comes on at something like 40 PSI. So it's quite possible in the pit idling, the oil pressure will appear to be low, and that's that bright orange light that we saw. There's nothing to worry about.
Here we have Dave McMillan going out again. He's obviously got second position on the grid, but he's going out because he thinks he can go quicker. They've made a few changes to the motor car, and Dave McMillan is very close to being able to get pole position. So I think David will look after his tyres and get ready for a flyer later on and try and get pole with Dave Jones.
Okay, outside of the improvements we've told you about, not a great deal of change, other than Dave McMillan moving right up there to second place. And that order at the moment, as I make it, will be the grid tomorrow, unless there's a time that we haven't heard of, but I think we've had them all. The grid looks like being Davy Jones and Davy Jones and Dave McMillan on the front, and then Ross Cheever and Jeff MacPherson, or Ross Cheever and Brett Riley. Ken Smith may change that as well. But that's likely to be the order. Davy Jones, Dave McMillan, Ross Cheever, Jeff MacPherson, Ken Smith, Brett Riley, and then Steve Cameron and Charlie O'Brien, Tom Blackwell, Riley Hopkins, Peter Haskett and Ross Zampatti. Still having some trouble getting to grips with the Formula Pacific car. Grand Prix tomorrow, the 32nd running of the Grand Prix. Let's have a look at some of the other cars that are here in ideal conditions here at the Pukekohe circuit for tomorrow's 32nd running of the New Zealand Grand Prix. The surprise in the field is that New Zealand's Dave McMillan, who was uncompetitive at Wigram and at Manfield, is back up there. He's in second place, splitting up the John Brandon team of Davy Jones and Ross Cheever. Davy Jones, as everyone expected, has pole position with 57.37, which is under Dave Oxton's lap record. That, of course, can only be set in a race, so we'll see tomorrow if he can set that. But that's the order. Davy Jones of America qualifies first, New Zealand's Dave McMillan second, and Ross Cheever of the United States, the other half of Davy Jones' team, in third place. Wigram Grand Prix Day, the 32nd running of the New Zealand Grand Prix. As we had expected, the man on pole and the favourite for the race is the man who has won the other New Zealand Grand Prix in 1984. Earlier in the year, of course, it was run in January then. Davy Jones and the John Brandon team, teamed with Ross Cheever, a fellow American. Let's, before we go any further, have a look at the times. We will have races on air for you today. And looking at that qualifying order, the front row is Davy Jones, 57.36. Dave McMillan from New Zealand is the second fastest qualifier, splitting up the John Brandon team. He's in front of Ross Cheever. Fourth qualifier, Jeff MacPherson, then Ken Smith behind him, then Brett Riley, then Charlie O'Brien, Steve Cameron, Tom Blackaller, Riley Hopkins, Peter Haskett and Ross Zampatti. Entire field, and introduce them to you in just a moment. Meantime, Graham Booth is down in the pits with the pole setter, the man to beat, Davy Jones.
Davey, you're certainly the man to beat today. You've been lapping consistently around the 57-second mark. The only person who's been doing that. Do you think you'll be able to keep up these 57-second laps during the race?
Well, in the practice, the 57s came quite easly. And, you know, I think if I can get out in front in this first race, I think I can quite comfortably do 57. So, you know, we'll just have to wait and see.
Are you making any predictions as to how low you could get the lap record, Davey?
Well, if it keeps cool like it is today, and if I'm out in front and, you know, I feel real good and comfortable in the car, then I think we could probably get down 57.0 maybe.
Let's have a word to Kenny Smith about his chances today. Certainly a lot of New Zealand hopes resting with him second in the series.
Well, Ken, yesterday in practice, the car didn't seem to be handling too well. She seemed to be pretty tail happy. Have you fixed the problem?
Well, last night we found that the car had a weak shock on the left rear, and we're only hoping that was the problem. But I think it probably did help towards making the car that slow yesterday.
Last week at Manfield, you said you thought Jones's car had the advantage around that particular circuit, but yours would be quicker at Pukekohe. Do you still feel that?
Well, I thought that after Wigram that the fast circuits would suit the older car better than the new one, but I think I might have been a bit wrong there, because he's doing a fantastic time around here. And when you look at his car, you wouldn't think it was going that quick, because the car looks rough in the turns, but it's certainly doing a good job.
Kenny, you've been racing very much longer than these guys. Do you regard yourself as something of the elder statesman out there on the track?
No, I don't feel any different to they would feel.
Do you give them any quarter at all?
No, no.
Features of Formula Pacific racing, despite the big-name stars that we've had here in the past, and Reg Cook, you know all about competition, is the fact that visiting stars have never had it their own way. They've always had to work for their money.
The New Zealanders in Formula Pacifics have always been very, very quick, because we use them in our Gold Star single-seater championship as well. And because of the competitive racing that New Zealanders have done in their previous races, the overseas stars have always had to work very hard here.
Look for Dave McMillan on the outside in car 41 on your screen, the pink and white car. Look for him to make a move around the outside of the first corner. I predict he'll make a stab for the outside, a corner he knows how to take very, very fast.
Coming up to the main grid proper now to form up in the grid positions. Davy Jones in the front of your picture, car number 1. Go back to Dave McMillan, first New Zealander, car 41. Ross Cheever, the other half of the John Brandon team, car 2. It's an interesting grid. Now, Dave McMillan is something of a specialist here at Pukekohe. He has the fastest time ever in a Pacific car. Let's have a look at the first corner as the race away. Davy Jones, a clean start. Dave McMillan going. Ross Cheever going wide. Into champion. Davy Jones, clear lead. Coming up on the inside is Jeff MacPherson. Cheever's off. Oh, looking at...
Brett Riley, in fact, has damaged the car very badly in that first corner accident. Who is that? Is that Cheever? No, in fact, it's our own Steve Cameron. Now, this is tragic for our New Zealanders. Yes. 2 of the top cars for the New Zealand hopes, both out in a spectacular first lap crash.
We'll have to see if they can get the circuit clear. The yellow flags are out. They're not going to stop the race. It will continue. So Davy Jones with a clear lead.
Dave McMillan got swallowed up in a shocking start. I would suggest he possibly missed first. Now, there's Jones off the track, right off the end of the first lap.
Cheever's got problems as well. And in the lead, it looks like we have Jeff MacPherson.
That's Jeff MacPherson, car number 70, the American driver. Well, there we go.
Jeff MacPherson, Ross Cheever, Dave McMillan is the order, with Charlie O'Brien up into 4th place behind him. Charlie O'Brien has improved dramatically since Wigram.
And Dave Jones has got back onto the circuit, so we could see a charge from Davy Jones coming back through it. He may have flat-spotted tyres. That won't help him later on in the race, but we can see a charge right through the field here.
That's Brett Riley's car, the CRC Duralux Rolls RT4, which looks a mess. Steve Cameron it was that he got into contact with. Still, Jeff MacPherson from America leading Ross Cheever, Dave McMillan, Charlie O'Brien.
Kenny Smith did a bit of a sideways wiggle coming out of the road. Here's the replay of the accident. Brett's got a bit wide, got caught up into the wall.
Yes, the marbles
Steve Cameron really had nowhere to go. In fact, he took to the grass in just a sort of a desperate, that's all he could do move.
There's a lot of marbles or what we call rubber on the outside of the circuit, and the driver's just got on that dust, and so you cannot do that on the first lap. All the other cars have been taking a pole line all day, and they got on the outside, and there's just nowhere to go except off the circuit.
I'd be very surprised if either of those cars is repaired by 4:30 for the Grand Prix proper.
Well, let's watch this battle here, Tony. Ross Cheever now has got the chance of his lifetime as he sees it, because now he's not competing with Davy Jones for a win. He's got a fellow countryman and Jeff MacPherson ahead of him. He believes, as in Ross Cheever's case, he believes he's got the pace to win, and he certainly knows that he must win this meeting to keep his championship hopes alive. So this is going to make a fantastic race.
Dave, this is going to be very interesting to see how much discipline Ross Cheever has got. How hard does he want to get to the front?
And Dave McMillan's not very far away in third place, a New Zealander against two Americans. And these two drivers in the front are able to hold each other a bit and allow Dave McMillan to close in.
Charlie O'Brien appears.
Davy Jones, Tony, did you see him at all on the screen?
Haven't seen him back on the circuit at all. We'll check it in a moment. Meantime, it looks like Kenny Smith is being held up just a little by Charlie O'Brien.
Yes, but let's watch the progress of Dave McMillan. Although he muffed the start, he's now probably as close to Cheever as, in fact, Cheever is to MacPherson. So the boys are really tracking it on now.
That's MacPherson in front in car 70. Ross Cheever second in car number 2. Dave McMillan third in car 41. Charlie O'Brien fourth.
Dave McMillan closing in around that sweeper there with a bump in it. He's an expert around his circuit. He knows it exceptionally well. So does Kenny Smith, but Kenny Smith is liable to be held up by Charlie O'Brien. So I think the charge is going to come from Dave McMillan as a New Zealander.
Well, without wishing to be disparaging about Davy Jones, he was the only driver with a clear advantage. The rest of them are almost on the same time, so we could have a real race on our hands. MacPherson still leading Ross Cheever. Dave McMillan in third place. Charlie O'Brien fourth. Ken Smith fifth.
Well, of course, I'm going to spoil the show and say, really, that I wish this was the actual Grand Prix, not the preliminary, because this is the sort of thing that great races are made of. Just drawing your attention there. Kenny Smith is now up to fourth. He's got past Charlie O'Brien. But had this been the Grand Prix, this would have been the test of the driver, Davy Jones, to see if he was capable of coming back through the field in the manner that we were used to seeing, say, KK Rosberg. But Jeff MacPherson leading this race well, in fact, pulling away from Ross Cheever just ever so slightly.
Okay, looking back through the field, Kenny Smith fifth, Charlie O'Brien behind him, looking back for Davy Jones.
Davy Jones
is up to 7th place.
Car number 1, the black car on your screen now.
It's right behind Tom Blackhauler.
Yes. Kenny Smith's gone off behind Charlie O'Brien. There could be oil on the circuit left over from the previous race because Davy Jones went off. We didn't expect him. 2 other cars went off. Kenny Smith had a spin. So there may be a lot of rubber sitting on the outside of corners that we didn't expect to be there in the first place.
That's Davy Jones past Ken Smith.
Kenny didn't expect to see Davy Jones in that position going past them. They thought they'd be fighting for first and second, and now they're actually battling for 6th and 5th and 6th.
Yeah, Davy Jones is going to come through this field. We have a race on our hands.
A true test for the on-form driver of the day. Davy Jones, the young American, can he get back? He's now up to 5th place. First still being held by Jeff MacPherson, second by Ross Cheever, third Dave McMillan. That's the gap back to Charlie O'Brien. And there's Davy Jones.
The problem for Davy Jones here, of course, is that he's now having to extend the car more than he would like to do. And really what Davy would like this race to be would be a nice cruise along and then to go into the Grand Prix with the knowledge that the car was capable. So now he's putting a lot of strain on this car just to catch his place back.
Well, that's motor racing, and he's going to have to live with that. He made a mistake, and it's going to cost him, and too bad. It's the way it is. At the moment, you've got an interesting race with 2 Americans on the front, followed by a New Zealander, followed by an Australian, followed by another American. We have a true international motor race on our hands now.
That's an intriguing battle up front there between Jeff MacPherson holding tenuously to first place. Dave McMillan is definitely pushing Ross Cheever for 2nd place. He's in 3rd at the moment. So the order at the moment is MacPherson in the front of your picture. Those 3, MacPherson, 2nd place Cheever, 3rd place Dave McMillan. And then the gap quite a ways back to 4th. But this is a good race in the front.
Yes, Dave McMillan closing around the S's there. He's a Pukekohe specialist, and he certainly charges very hard through the corners. I noticed in the previous lap, down the back straight, he didn't have to quite the terminal top speed of the others. And notice the drivers weaving to stop slipstreaming going on.
Actually, first, second and third, none of them is close enough to the other to slipstream at the moment. But Jeff MacPherson getting out of the way so that that can't be done to him.
This, in fact, is a carbon copy of the first lap of last year's race. Davy Jones on the first lap went straight off the end on the first lap, came back, but in fact crashed about 10 laps into the event. So Davy's not having a lot of luck with the prelims, but he does obviously have a lot of luck at the big ones.
We've got a very close motor race here. There's only a split of second between these drivers, and maybe 100 feet, but the slightest mistake and another driver gets through.
Jeff MacPherson, of course, 28-year-old American boy. We have a passing move on. Ross Cheever having a go up the inside. Didn't come off, though. No, it's a little bit adventurous to think he could get through. But who's profited most is Dave McMillan, who is right up now on the back of Ross Cheever.
And Davy Jones closing nicely. There's Dave McMillan.
Ross Cheever has gone off in his usual first, or should we say, I shouldn't be so harsh, but we've come to expect him to do that sort of thing.
A marvellous piece of car control to come back on the circuit without spinning there. On the outside of that corner was covered in rubber and oil, and it was a marvellous piece of car control. And if he had a race in the rain, this man would be a real sprinter and would probably lead a race until he probably went off. And here's Davy Jones, trying very hard, clipping the curbs, closing in.
Well, you shouldn't be out there. That's no man's land as far as a racing line. It's a mistake that he shouldn't have made. But the interesting thing is his left front aerofoil is bent on the wrong side to the car that he went off. Now, I would suggest he ran into MacPherson the previous corner as he was trying to do an overtaking move.
At the hairpin.
That may well have affected his turn into that fast corner and induced his excursion wide onto the grass. But full marks, he didn't go and have the big accident in the back.
Well, Davy Jones closing right in. MacPherson in the lead, followed by Davy McMillan, and then Davy Jones closing right in.
This is a great race out front. Can MacPherson hold off New Zealand's Dave McMillan? A trench has been associated with that. Cheever in the pits to straighten the wing.
Yes.
Well, of course, he gives away effectively any chance in the race. You can't stop in a 20-lap race, and it appears that all they've done is just taken the wing right off so that it is not actually doing him any detrimental effect on cornering.
And if he gets wide on some of these corners, it could be in a bit of trouble, but I think here it is. Davy Jones about to come down the inside of Dave McMillan.
On the inside.
Here he goes. He's trying very hard.
Dave's not going to give it to him easily. No, he's through. Clean, very nice manoeuvre.
Yeah, he's got good power in that car.
I was just about to say, the man waving the blue flag, which indicates someone's trying to pass you, probably waving it at Dave McMillan is the most superfluous thing in the world. If anybody knew that Davy Jones was about to pass him or was trying to, Dave McMillan would have.
Well, this is the passing manoeuvre. Around about 140 miles per hour at this point. Both drivers trusting each other perfectly well. Look at that. Nice manoeuvre. Very, very close, but two good drivers doing an overtaking move.
I'm surprised there at Dave McMillan being 40 years of age, knowing the circuit, pulling over the outside. If he'd stayed down the inside, I don't think Davy McMillan could have gone around it. Davy Jones could have gone around the outside of him.
Well, Reg, you know, in single-seaters, we don't set out to block like you do in saloons.
Well, I can't agree with you, David. I've watched motor racing for a long time, and all motor racing is about staying in the front. You don't pull over and let someone through, and that's what I think Davy McMillan made a mistake and let him through. He should have stayed on the inside, forced him around the outside. He could have been in the tyres now.
Well, looking at the gap that they've managed, that Davy Jones has pulled out on Dave McMillan, I would suggest to you, Dave, McMillan believed that there was no point in holding him up.
Are you suggesting that the term gentleman racer is a contradiction in terms?
When you look in your mirrors and you weigh up the gap. Now, let's look at this battle here. This is MacPherson weaving to make sure that he doesn't help Jones up the straight.
Yes, he's very determined. He's got a lot more talent than we thought, this Jeff MacPherson. He's weaved all over the place and come back down on the inside of the circuit.
At the end here.
Can Davy Jones?
Up the inside.
Yes, Davy Jones has taken the lead into the hairpin.
Well, this is a phenomenal drive from Davy Jones. We really must give him credit. Coming off at the end of the back straight, very early on in the race, losing 4 or 5 places and driving back to the lead. That is a phenomenal drive, regardless of the car's performance.
Yes. Well, certainly it's not unlike the drive that we came to see from KK Rosberg some years ago when he went off on the first lap, went to last place, and came back to win the race. But full marks to Davy. A hard way to try and win a race, though. And I think his team manager, Graham Watson, will be saying, good drive, lad, but why did you go charging off on the first lap?
Well, it doesn't matter. The man has got the ability to pass another cars that are virtually equal in terms of performance and power.
Confirmation. Davy Jones has just broken our co-commentator's lap record, 57.56. It was 57.57.
He is a second, and the next fastest time is 58.69 with Dave McMillan and Jeff MacPherson doing 58.82. So Davy Jones is going a second lap faster than the next fastest person. And that is a credit to the man, because these cars are theoretically equal in terms of power, tyres, weight, and the way they handle. And they're all rolled RT4s. So Davy Jones is just a better driver.
It also goes to underline, Reg, why I think that Dave Mack didn't put in much of a battle to hold him back, because when you look in the mirrors and realise the speed at which a car is approaching you, if it's taken him a long, long while to actually inch onto the back of you, you give him a raise. But if he's actually closing at a second a lap, which is exactly what Jonesy was doing, then there's no real point. You don't wave him through, but you certainly don't make it that hard.
They're going a good race too.
Now here's an example of Davy Jones's power. This car has definitely got more power than the others. He's just passing his own teammate down the back straight. That had nothing to do with handling and nothing to do with traction out of the corner. He's obviously got the fastest engine in the circuit and probably one of the best chassis as well. And Ross Cheever wouldn't be very happy being in a car there and the same team getting passed like that down the back straight. He wouldn't be very happy at all.
Part of the reason why Davy Jones can drive around Ross Cheever on other parts of the circuit. I'm not contradicting Reg in terms of straight line speed, but bear in mind that Ross Cheever is driving with no front wings, which reduces the downforce on the front wheels and therefore means you can't have the same turn-in speed. To be asked here is how hard Davy Jones had to work that very strong motor to gain the lead again and to go back out and gain a second a lap. It is obviously a strong motor. How hard has he worked the car?
Davy Jones has obviously worked the car very hard, and he'd be very happy, having made a mistake on the first lap, to come back at one. He can justify to his team he isn't going to get rubbish for the initial mistake he made, because he's come out and won the race. So he'd be very happy about that as he receives the checkered flag very shortly.
Davy Jones coming down for the checkered flag. He will win it from Jeff MacPherson, and New Zealand's Dave McMillan in third place.
Well, certainly the way we'd like to see
Ross
races
Cheever a lap back.
There's Jeff MacPherson coming across second now.
And third place looking back for the pink Moore car of New Zealand's Dave McMillan. Okay, David Oxton's lap record has gone. The official new lap record for Pukekohe and Pacific cars is 57.56, broken by 100 by Davy Jones.
And a marvellous drive from Davy Jones. I mean, what more can you ask for? Maybe a future world champion in the making here. We saw Kiki Rosberg do this sort of thing. And you're probably looking, if this man can get support around the world and eventually get into Formula One, New Zealanders are probably seeing, as I said before, a future world champion again.
Yeah, he's a happy young man.
Him come down to the finish and get greeted like that.
Just before the start of that preliminary, Davy Jones said to me, I wish they had one big race and not this preliminary thing, because I'm a bit nervous about this. And I think possibly when he went out in the first heat, he knew he had to win, but he possibly was, you know, trying to save the car. But he's won it. That's all that matters now. The worst that could have happened would have been maybe a flat-spotted front tyre on the outside left front. But here's Davy now.
Well, Davy Jones, that was one heck of a race. It must have been pretty exciting from where you saw it too.
It was really great because, you know, I haven't really made a mistake in the beginning there, and you know, I was last, and I haven't come up through to win a race since my Formula 4 days, and it just felt really good to do it. You know, the car is good, we have a good engine, the team's good, and when you have everything good like that and everything just goes your way, the luck, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. So.
Davey, any ideas why you did go off there on the first lap?
Well, I might have made just a slight driver's error and left my braking just a bit too late. And because there's one thing about that corner is if they're tucked in behind you, you're always afraid of the person behind you making a mistake like I did and hitting you from behind. So I left my braking just a little bit too late, and I locked him up, and I couldn't just go wide around the corner, and I just went off and come back on peacefully. So.
Davey, you did that, well, as the Irish might say, get your dander up. Were you really determined to get back to the front there? I
was. You know, we've been running really good in practice all week, and we had a slight engine problem, but it's the same engine that we had the problem with, and it really feels good. And like I said, when you have good machinery like that, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. So it's all determination, and that's what I gave it. So.
Davey, and now what for the next race, for the Grand Prix itself? Are you going to obviously be getting out in front and avoiding the sort of problems you had then?
Well, I'll just try. I'll think twice about braking extra deep in that corner. So we just hope that we can stay in front this time and just do like we did.
Davey, I've just been told that you've got a new lap record. What's your reaction to that? I believe you've knocked about 1/10 of a second off.
That's great. You know, I believe that I was a bit quicker than that in practice, and you have to break a record in the race, and I'm really pleased to hear that because I didn't know that. But, you know, I hope if the weather holds out, maybe we'll be able to knock that down a bit more in the Grand Prix.
Should have been caught out like that with nowhere to go, and 2 cars badly damaged, and 2 New Zealanders that we had hoped to do very, very well.
There is 2.5 hours, of course, to try and repair those cars. I can't tell at this point whether the tub, that is the chassis of these 2 cars, is damaged sufficiently to put them out of the meeting. But there's smiles on the face of the Davy Jones crew, but these poor guys you feel for. They're the ones that are going to have to pull that apart and make a real attempt to try and get in the race that they've come 20,000 miles to beat. Last year was running a wet-dry combination. Now here's some of the old photos. That's Stan Jones, Alan Jones' father, one of the first Grand Prix winners. At Ardmore in the days when we had the 4th New Zealand Grand Prix, there must have been some sort of a promo at Ardmore. The good old days, as we say. That's a Ferrari in the foreground. It's Ron Roycroft's Ferrari, a blue number 19 Ferrari car. One of the great New Zealand drivers of old, Ron Roycroft. In the background was a Super Squallow Ferrari, I believe, but that's one of the... Look at the size of the steering wheel, nearly as big as some of the wheels on the modern road cars. That's I believe that's a Monza Ferrari, car number 18. That looks possibly like a Ross Jensen sports car. Fine old race mechanic there doing his expertise on a Ferrari, firing spark plugs at the old girl. And that's a face I'm afraid even I can't remember, so he must be a long while ago.
Wasn't that Jack Brabham?
Or...
I think it was Jack Brabham in his youth.
Should we say, now there's a fellow by the name of Horace Gould in the car in the centre, Rolly Crowther in car 35 and a Lotus 11. And that looks like Tony Palmer trying to conduct the race, but maybe not. Here we've got Ron Roycroft, obviously flag marshal. That must be Laurie Powell, I'd say. Yes, there's one of the old Maseratis, a 250F model that used to be... Now look at the people in that stand.
And look how narrow the tyres were.
There's the famous Grand Prix Cup. That's the pride and joy at what everyone is racing for today. Car number 1.
That's Jack Brabham again.
No, in fact, I think that might be Ken Wharton from England, who was unfortunately lost in a very serious accident at that meeting. Look at the crowd at that fantastic... Now, this is the first Grand Prix at Pukekohe, if my memory serves me right. It's coming up the hill, and that's to be the days of the Clarks, the Stewarts, the Hills, the Rints, and all those world-class champions.
Going around what is the elbow, around the long circuit in those days, and now it's been shortened.
It's Graham Hill and a BRM, number 2. It's a 2.2-litre V8 fuel-injected racing car. Laurie Powell there, and there's Jackie Stewart with Graham Hill. Jim Palmer, a great New Zealand driver with Graham Hill. Graham Hill showing some of his off-track form. And there's that famous cup again. Denny Holm, Jim Clark. There's Tim Parnell, team manager in the centre. Chris Amon with a little bit more hair than he can grow today. There's Will Phillips, the famous American mechanic. And there's me in the car, I believe, but it can't be because it hasn't got my name on it.
Again, rolling around the pits.
Now, these were real racing cars. Fantastic sounding V8s, but believe it or not, they were slower than the modern Formula Pacific car. So such is the development of the little Ford engines. I think that's Richard Atwood spinning backwards off at Railway, so they obviously had spins in those days too.
Intriguing looking at the history of this motor race. When you look at today's crowd, back in the days of Ardmore, they used to get 80,000 people. 80,000.
Now, this is Herb Rottengutter and Steve Millen. Watch the car on the right of your screen. You can't see it, but obviously a very nasty accident occurred between Steve Millen and Herb Rottengutter. And now we come to 1984, the second Grand Prix for 1984. Davy Jones, in fact, taking his position on the start line. All the cars are formed. The track is a little bit damp, but it's not raining. Laurie Powell has taken the stand. The flag is up.
It is raining.
And it's away.
The New Zealand Grand Prix, the second one for 1984. Davy Jones into the first corner. Dave McMillan on the outside. Ross Cheever on the inside. Jeff MacPherson fourth. Davy Jones leads Ross Cheever. Dave McMillan third. Have a look as they get round to Castro. Jones through first. Cheever second. McMillan third. MacPherson fourth. Charlie O'Brien fifth. Fifth sixth.
In fact, 2 black cars in the lead. Do not be confused. The man leading, Davy Jones, has a white helmet. The second man, Ross Cheever, also an American, has a red and blue helmet. So just look for the white helmet and think Davy. Car number 1.
Now, we told you a little earlier that we would have a word with Steve Cameron, who was involved in that incident in the preliminary race. We'll try and get to him during this race, if we can.
The rain has come down. It's starting, the track is wet at our point, and there's Riley Hopkins off at the hairpin.
And when they come round to the front straight, they're going to walk a virtual drive into a lot of rain, and it's going to be very, very slippery. And when they left before, it wasn't wet. Now they're going to come out of this, so you could see some antics now.
Of course, these are the conditions Davy Jones likes. Remembering 1 year ago, this was exactly the condition for the start of the Grand Prix, and where he picked out an immediate lead from the rest of us. Ross Cheever now, second place. Dave McMillan third. Jeff MacPherson fourth. Charlie O'Brien, Ken Smith. That looks like Tom Blackhauler, Peter Haskett, and Ross Zampatti. Now, Ross Cheever slithering around champion Castrol there.
It's very, very slippery. From all the oil and the cement dust and this water mixed together, it makes a very, very slippery mixture. So the real talented drivers and the push on people to go quicker, but they may also come off later on in the race. So whilst we might see people leading now, they have to also be cautious to survive.
I noticed it's not a nice thought, but I noticed that the fire crews parked right in front of us have all togged up and started up their fire engine.
Let's just say they're keeping warm,
yes.
Eh?
Davy Jones getting a lot of trouble, hard getting traction out of the hairpin.
Two different lines used by those drivers. Did you notice that, Reg?
Yes.
I think, in fact, Davy was using your classic wide, using all the track line, and Ross is going for the tighter line, which might, in fact, be drier.
Davy Jones getting a lot of trouble with his slicks on this wet circuit. The rain is pelting down on the front straight now, and this is very, very dangerous. These tyres have got absolutely no grooves for the water, and Davy Jones's car's slithering all over the place. Ross Cheever getting very wide there.
These cars will drop about 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds per lap. Now, their qualifying times, something in the 58-second region. Very slippery corner, that railway corner, but they'll drop about 10 to 15 seconds per lap. But look at the rooster tails, as we call them, coming off those wide slip tyres. The airflow over the car is forcing the rain to actually do a circle and finish up higher than the car. And that's what's called in the trade rooster tails.
These drivers would actually be 5 seconds a lap faster if they were on wet weather tyres. And it may be interesting to see if the rain keeps pouring down, some of them may decide to come in and pit for wet weather tyres, which may actually allow them to come back and win the race later on if the rain keeps up. But at the moment, they're certainly going very carefully and slowly to keep on the circuit, but there may be a change later on.
Well, this is an amazing display of skill from Davy Jones, as with Ross Cheever, has had a series, one in Europe, one in England in Formula 3, where they get wet weather races and they get some practice in the wet.
Davy Jones is getting awfully sideways at times, and he'll have to be very careful.
The old question is, and probably you viewers who don't understand, you say, well, if it's raining, why don't you use these stupid wet tyres? The fact of it is, it's not wet enough, and you might have heard Graham Crosby say earlier that wet tyres are only useful when the track is flooded, and that is actually when it looks like glass. In that particular point of the track, yes, it is wet, but there are enough points on the track. Now, probably this is Tom Blackwell, I would say he's probably going to say either, I'm going home today, thanks very much, or we'll put some wet tyres on. And probably he would like to try and put the wet knowledge of the wet confidence. But Davy, being younger, braver, he's going to take the chances. And he's going to just slither around that hairpin. He's getting good traction, really, considering it's wet. But, of course, no immediate pressure on him. Ross comes out with a tighter line, but Jones is pulling away, so obviously Jones has got the faster line.
I can't believe how quickly Davy Jones is going, considering how wet that track is. He's, you know, slithering on the edge, and it looks like...
We've had an accident. We've had a spin here. Now, maybe that's... Looks like Charlie O'Brien's car has either stopped. We hoped it only just a mechanical problem, but fortunately it's being pushed. So, in fact, Davy Jones leading. Ross Cheever, America second. A long gap back now to Jeff MacPherson, car number 70, another black car. Jeff MacPherson and the Alan McCall run and entered Ralton. The race is so short, even though it's 40 laps, it does not allow time to stop in the pits and have a cup of tea and adjust the throttle. It's a speed race, a sprint race, and that's what this man's all about, going for the flag, not stopping to decide whether he should go soft or hard on the corners, flat out driving. And that's what it takes to win New Zealand Grand Prix.
Davy Jones showing absolutely impeccable car control in these slippery conditions. Every time he gets a bit sideways, he pulls it back into line. He'd make a brilliant rally driver.
please, Reg, leave your roundies or your rally boys, your grabber rushes away from this. This is the New Zealand Grand Prix, the top thing. I mean, you saw the names that were out there before: Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, Graham Hill. And Kenny Smith would be our first Kiwi driver, so he's running in probably 4th place overall. There's Kenny, firing his rooster tails up. I would say he's probably... Well, I would say he's probably having a hard time seeing where he's going with all the spray, and the oil mixture makes the visors quite a risky business, just turning into corners. He's not going to take too many chances, but here's the man that is taking the chances, Davy Jones. He's not going to ease up. We've noticed that in the past, that even when he actually gets a lead, he's not prepared to back off. He doesn't see where the car is. All you see is a ball of spray. So I think Ross is probably going to be quite happy to run around at this point, in this place, getting confidence in this car in the rain. Now, I think there's someone off there. That's Davy. Davy Jones has gone off. Well,
Ross Cheever's in the lead.
After all the nice things we said about him keeping his copybook clean, he's gone and spoiled it. Now, this is interesting because that track is actually partially blocked.
There are only yellow flags, no red flags yet.
Well, it's the old trap. He's probably come around the left-hand turn, approaching the Rothmans corner. He's actually understeered wide, I would say. That's the wheels pointing towards the left. That's an understeer. He's turned left to try and get a better line at the hill, and then bango, he's gone around. Of course, Ross is probably, in a sense, glad that he's now in the lead, but I'm sure he wouldn't be very happy to see his own teammate damaged and in this position. There's the long walk back, young Davy. Well, this is the one Grand Prix of '84, Davy, that you're not going to win.
Yes, looks like Ross Cheever will be doing what he wants to do. He said he wanted to win the New Zealand Grand Prix, and he's in the lead at the moment, providing he keeps on the dry line and keeps off the wet line. He should have a good chance of doing what he wants to do.
So we have Ross Cheever, the race leader. Kenny Smith second.
Jeff MacPherson should still be second in our reckoning.
Kenny Smith third.
Kenny Smith third. So I'm going to stick my neck out and say, how about a Jeff MacPherson for a race win?
Well, I mean, Ross Cheever's getting very wide over the top over there. He's in the lead. There was no need for that. And he's got to be careful.
Dave McMillan in the pits there. They're changing the tyres. I don't think that's why they pitted. They pitted for the misfire.
They may have found the misfire problem simply, and
Ross Cheever getting very wide there. He's got to be careful because his teammate's sitting over the damaged car and he's in the lead. He wants to win the Grand Prix, but if he keeps doing that, he won't.
Well, at this point, Graham Watson, team manager, will be seething. He'll be saying, well, we've lost one car, but we've still got one in the lead. But Ross Cheever, just take control and just keep that position. Don't throw it away. In theory, at least, there is not a lot of pressure on Ross Cheever. But very clearly, we've lost our first heat winner, the boy wonder for our Pacific Racing, Davy Jones. A crash at the Rothmans turn, and very unfortunate to lose Davy that way.
Ross Cheever's elder brother, Eddie Cheever, said, take it easy, and I'm sure that, I hope that he listens to what his elder brother in Formula 1 said to him, and he should be able to win this race. But
the problem here, of course, is that it's not really raining, but there's enough dampness in the air to just keep the track a greasy mess, and that's what Ross is probably tempted to dive in and put the power on quickly now, but he has to remember also it's very, very greasy, and he's constantly wiggling the wheel there, correcting, fighting the engine power slide.
Well, Steve Cameron, it looks pretty rough out there. Of course, you're not racing as a result of your accident earlier in the day. Do you wish you were there?
Yeah, I'd still love to be out there. It'd be great.
You did a bit of damage not only to the car, but to yourself. Let's start with you, first of all. What do you think you've done to yourself on that track?
The doctors say I've either bruised or cracked my ribs, so I'll go and get some x-rays once this race is over.
Well, without seeming callous, of course, people fix, but you've got a more difficult problem, I believe, in fixing your car. Tell us about that.
Well, the car is pretty badly damaged. We got to put a whole new chassis in it, and I basically took the whole left side of the car off. All the spares are available here, but it's a matter of raising the finance.
What sort of money do you need, Steve?
Well, we've worked it out. If we can raise about $8,000, we can do it. We can get the car together and be the next race at Bay Park and have a go against these internationals.
Where do you think you might be able to get that sort of money?
What I'm hoping is that I can get some of the New Zealand companies to back us. Most of my support's been from the Americans, like Rick Shea, who owns the team. We've been looking for support from New Zealanders, but it just hasn't been forthcoming. we got some backing from the shipping corp. We brought our cars over, and corporate flight service have provided me with some running costs. But other than that, it's just been an uphill battle, and nobody seems interested in promoting the New Zealanders here.
That he'd love to win a Grand Prix still. He's only got one man ahead of him to beat him, and he happens to be a 19-year-old. So with all the stick that he's been getting in the press, he might be out to try and show that age is still better than beauty.
Okay, Ross Cheever still hanging on to that lead while his teammate is disconsolate in the pits. Graham Booth is with him. Let's see if we can get a word about that little crash.
Well, Davey, we've just heard about your crash. What did it look like from your point of view?
Well, I would say I had quite a comfortable lead, and I was settling down quite nicely. And coming out of we were going into a left-hand corner. It just got a little bit twitchy in the rear. I had a little bit of oversteer, and I counter-corrected that, and I just got some grip in the front. And it just sent me around backwards and into the tire wall. So it's a bit unlucky, you know, after being on the pace by so quickly, and you know, winning the first race, and then having this misfortune of the rain. You know, it was just sprinkling in the beginning, and we were on slicks, and I was debating whether to come into the pits, but it was very hard for me to tell whether it was still raining or whether it was drying out or what, so I just didn't know. But I think I would have come in for pits sooner or later.
The cars are liable to aquaplane shortly, and anything could happen when that starts.
Oh, that's getting to the level now, David, where...
That's very serious. This race could be at a point where the organisers can take the initiative to stop the race. We have a precedent for this in Monaco. Yeah. Of course, the chance is there for the drivers to stop and change their tyres. But I would say Ross Cheever's saying, well, blow it. If I'm going to stop, that Smith can go through and take the lead. So what does he do? He's got a terrible decision on his plate now.
He should really stop and change the wet tyres, don't you think, David?
Well, I don't know. It's his decision. He's in the lead, and I must be fair about it. If he feels he's in control, there's no one going to catch him. And certainly in the number of laps left, I don't believe anyone who actually stopped and put rain tyres on could actually go out and catch him. So providing he can hold that thing, it's like driving on glass at the moment, providing he can hold that car in a straight line.
I've just seen Charlie O'Brien running through the pits, so his car's off the out somewhere.
Well, we have a further problem. Now, this is... here he goes. Off he goes. Yes, well, he's all right. He's still poking straight ahead. Yeah. He'll grab first gear. No, he's gone around.
Kenny Smith.
Now, Kenny will be through in a minute.
And he's liable to hit him.
No, that's not very smart. On the track, off the track. Okay, we've got cars everywhere at this point.
Yeah, there won't be
now,
many cars.
Where's Kenny? Where's Kenny?
Anybody that finishes this lap will probably win the Grand Prix.
Well, it's a bit of a lottery. This might be the first Grand Prix that no one finishes. What we've got is a replay now of Ross Cheever losing a little bit of ground at the edge there. Couldn't hold it any longer. Good try, though. And he's trying to let it just ease its way across the grass. It's probably bashing the fiberglass and the aluminium to pieces there, but he's still holding on. He's got a left lock. He's trying to keep it pointed, but it's like, as I say, walking on glass. Where at this point there is only one car actually going around the circuit.
And I think it's Jeff MacPherson. There's Jeff MacPherson's going around a circuit. So whoever comes around is liable to win the Grand Prix. I'm sure they're liable to stop the race at any time now.
Well, you've got me. At this point, I couldn't tell you who's actually leading. That's actually Tom Blackwalder.
Tom Blackwalder's still running.
Dave McMillan has just left the pits for about the 8th time, trying to fix misfires. Completely impossible condition to try and run a motor race.
Blackwalder's stopped to put wets on, so he's right out of contention. So Jeff MacPherson may be in the lead.
Is that right, Reg? I thought it was his yachting experience.
Look at that water. Yes, Jeff MacPherson couldn't go any slower. I don't think if he actually pushed it round that corner. Ken Smith, I guess, is in the pits. There's Dave McMillan out, and we know he's on wets, but look, that is an example of what can happen. Just the slightest a bit of power, and that car will swap ends. And that's the dangerous situation all these drivers are faced with.
Down the back straight with aquaplaning would be very dangerous, so I'm sure they're going to stop this race. So whoever's running, without having called into the pits, is going to be the winner of the Grand Prix.
It's a first-class exhibition of what is called aquaplaning. These cars are actually driving on water so fast that the tyres are not touching the ground. And when the cars actually turn to the corner and you see that they don't actually make the corner, they go skating off. They're actually above the water. Here is Dave McMillan.
We've just heard it from the pits, and the race will continue.
Dave McMillan's on wets. And Blackwalder's on wets.
Dave McMillan, of course, lost several laps in the pits, so we can't really count his position.
Yes, no, but I don't think any cars are going to cross the finish line that are on slicks, so whoever's on wets is going to be the winner. That's Blackwater.
No, it's not. In fact, he's done the loop-de-loop. He's kept it on the island, as they say, hooked first gear, and he'll just do a 4-point to 5-point turn.
I think the only cars I can see on the circuit at the moment are Blackwater and McMillan. I think all the other cars are full.
Well, there's Dave McMillan. He's just gone past our commentary point at about 5 miles an hour.
Yeah,
so it's one of the slowest Grand Prix on record, at least. There's Kenny in the pits.
Yeah, so there's only 2 cars on the circuit. Here's Jeff MacPherson, who's going to win the New Zealand Grand Prix.
Jeff MacPherson doesn't know whether to... Now we've actually been told there's a red flag on the circuit, which of course means that all the drivers must return to the pits. And if that was in fact the race position, they would revert to the positions of the lap before, well, the lap before the red flag went out.
Close race.
Okay, the news is, if you've just joined us, the New Zealand Grand Prix, the second New Zealand Grand Prix for 1984, was running in torrential rain. There were dangerous conditions. There was a great deal of confusion as to whether the race would be stopped or continue. Some people came in and put wet weather tyres on. Others stayed out there on their slicks. Now, we've lost half the field having slid off, which is quite understandable. They've decided now that there will be a restart, which means that everybody puts wet weather tyres on. Hopefully, the rain stays around so that the wet weather tyres don't wear out. And we have a restart with whoever was left running at the time they stopped it.
And this is Dave McMillan's car, which had a miss in it before, and probably because of the wet. And they're trying desperately hard to find out what's wrong and get it going again, because Dave, when he came in to fix it, put wet weather tyres on and was still running when the race was stopped. So he's still in with a chance of winning the Grand Prix if he get his car going again in the restarted race and running on all 4 cylinders. Because they go back to 19 laps and it was originally 40, the race hasn't run half distance, so they cannot stop a race until it's run half distance. So that's the reason why we're going to have a second start.
Okay, there's Graham Watson and Kenny Smith. Let's see if we can listen into them.
They should have declared a wet flag, but that's the right decision. On the left side, we're being stopped.
Utter confusion for the last 10 minutes, and next Saturday's Sport on 1 is where you'll be able to see the conclusion of this, which I'm sure most of us here are intrigued to know. It has been decided to restart the race from lap 18 and the positions they were on and elapsed time. By the end of the race, they will add together the elapsed times, and the one with the shortest, of course, will win the event. So the situation we have at the moment is Ross Cheever was leading on lap 18, or with 18 completed. His elapsed time, 21:05:08. Ken Smith is next on the same lap. 21:37:26 is his elapsed time. That's the gap. So to explain it for you, Ken Smith would have to beat Ross Cheever by that difference to win the Grand Prix. Jeff MacPherson is still in there on 18 laps. Peter Haskett on 18 laps. And looking at the rest of the field, we only have 6-7 starters. Riley Hopkins on 21:01:69. Tom Blackwater on 17 laps, 22:01:69. And Dave McMillan on 8 laps after many, many visits to the pits. But for some reason, he's decided to restart. He may get him in the points with the attrition rate that's here. Coming up to the grid proper now to form up again, and once again the rain starts to fall. Each time they have set a cue, each time they've tried to start this race, it has come down in buckets. This time they have wet weather tyres on. All they need as a guarantee is to get this race to 30 laps, because if they get to 30 laps, they will then, under the international rules, be able to call it a race. Ross Cheever away first. Kenny Smith on the outside of them, looking them into the first corner. Ross Cheever needs to be there first. Ken Smith right on his tail.
Peter Haskett's driving the way he normally does in the 3rd place. Hard charge with Peter Haskett.
Ross Cheever must do well in this race, obviously. He knows that wet weather tyres, and he's got the lead, and it's going to take a miracle for anyone to pass him. So if ever a Grand Prix was handed to someone, then this is the one, but he's still got to stay on the road.
Yes, even though he's got wet weather tyres, there's a few puddles in a few places, and you can still aquaplane, and he'd certainly be a lot happier with the tyres he's got on the others before.
Jeff MacPherson grabbing 3rd place back from Peter Haskett at that point. Dave McMillan now up to 4th place, in fact. So Dave coming through the field well. We, of course, lost Davy Jones. I thought there might have been a chance of a repair of his
accident-damaged car from the first start of the Grand Prix. In fact, it's seriously damaged and was beyond repair for this event.
Ross Cheever, he'll have to stay on the road and be a little more conservative than perhaps he was in the earlier race. Ken Smith still behind him. Ken Smith, I think, knowing full well that the only way he's going to win the Grand Prix is if Ross Cheever comes off, because he'd have to beat it by 30-odd seconds to have a chance.
And he's also got to get past him, and in these conditions of visibility, it's virtually impossible.
Shocking conditions to expect to race in, but in order to get a result, as Reg said earlier, we must complete at least another 12 laps in order to declare a winner of the New Zealand Grand Prix.
The race has to go 3/4 distance, which is 30 laps out of the original 40. Peter Haskett's in the pits. It's a great shame after he's doing so well. Looks like they're going to rip something off the car, which they have, and out he goes again.
In fact, the air filter, which is a foam rubber insert into the carburetor airbox, has become soaked with water, and that is killing the performance, but it's not helped the car. We hear it go by our box, and it's missing fire quite badly. The engine has become soaked already
with water,
which of course is a potential problem for all of them, as are the hazardous conditions. So it's a case of whether or not Ross Cheever can stay on the tarmac for long enough to hold out another 10 laps, and he will win the New Zealand Grand Prix, the second for 1984.
You notice that he's got his red light on, which is what they have to carry in wet conditions, because with all the spray, you can virtually not see the car in front of you, but it's easy to see the red light.
I certainly don't think I've seen conditions this bad in a New Zealand motor race for Pacific cars. I mean, it's absolutely amazing that the drivers can even want to go out and race in this condition. In America, of course, they call off races. They won't have them at all in weather like this, but European-type racing, South Pacific-type racing, we give it a go.
There was only one race that I've seen as wet as this. It was a Gold Star race at Manfield about 3 years ago, which Robbie Finisevich won, and cars were spinning even with wet all over the place, even on straights, with aquaplaning everywhere. So that'd be the only race I've seen in this country that have been wetter than this one today.
This will do Ross Cheever no harm at all to be morally going to win this race. At least he's aiming to be. He's pulling out an amazing amount of road over Ken Smith, and this is just the sort of lift he'll need at this point.
MacPherson, who closed in before on
Tom Blackwell off on the grass there, rejoined now.
MacPherson, who was closing on Kenny Smith, can't actually get any closer because of the spray, and it's very, very difficult to pass in these conditions.
So remembering that Ross Cheever in your picture now is really leading this race by the margin that he has over Ken Smith, plus 32 seconds. So in fact, he was 32 seconds in the lead of the race when it was stopped, and now he is increasing his lead by the distance between him and the second place man, who we think still is Ken Smith, although we haven't seen him for a moment. Notice the bright red light. That's the compulsory light that the drivers must put on in conditions like this. In fact, if a car was to come up behind Ross Cheever, that's really all he would see, would be a faint red glow in the center of a ball of spray.
Yes, I think we should emphasize that point, David, that whilst we're on television, we can see these cars. When you're racing in the rain, you cannot see the car in front of you. All you can see is the mist, and you don't even know which side the car is off in many conditions like this. And whilst it's easy for us to see them here, in those conditions it's virtually impossible to see the car.
Well, in fact, Reg, television tells a lie in terms of the picture anyway. If you look out the window, it's a great deal darker than it looks on your picture on the screen. That's Peter Haskett off again at the same
shortening
place.
the track up. He obviously has a bit of trouble negotiating the right-hand turn, casting a plume of spray. The more Ralph, he just knows that although he's aiming to follow that car, it's a very bad risk to take, because if that driver should spin off, he wouldn't be able to see where he was and could, in fact, jeopardize running into him without knowing that he had. There's Kenny Smith in the Ralt RT4. As Richard said, a previous winner of this race, but he's going to have to pull one out of the bag to win this New Zealand Grand Prix, because it seems to have Ross Cheever's name stamped on it already. Ross Cheever, car number 2. Graham Watson entered Ralt from Ralt, Australia, driving superbly.
Anything can happen, though. Even though Ross is making no mistakes, it only takes one little thing, and he can come off. And it's what we said about Davy Jones in the previous heat. We said that he was driving well, but anything can happen, and Ross Cheever won't be happy until he sees a checkered flag.
Well, this race will go down on the record as the one which everyone thought they've won. It all depends on when the race was originally stopped, and I feel that the organisers probably took the only decision that they felt was reasonable, and that was to go back to the lap at which all the cars were still in the race. And it's a little bit unfair. Someone will feel they've lost. Tom Blackwell probably thinks that he should be in the lead, and so on and so forth. But a
decision has been made, and that's the main thing.
Well, I'd agree with you there, David. The decision they made is the correct one. Otherwise, you'd have only had a race restarting with 2 cars, and they've gone back to a situation where they had 7 cars running, and it's the only way to do it.
That's Peter Haskett about to be lapped by Ross Cheever. That's not a bad sort of performance. Peter Haskett's had a couple of little offs, and the car doesn't seem to be handling the conditions as well as Ross Cheever's, but you wouldn't really expect someone to get lapped in these conditions.
Well, the race could stop at any time. We can't tell you when the last lap is approaching. We must leave that with the officials. We'll watch Laurie Powell with interest at the start-finish line, and we assume now that Ross Cheever is comfortably just cruising with the knowledge that he's got at least probably something close to a minute's advantage over his nearest rival, Ken Smith of New Zealand.
He wouldn't want to make any mistakes now, though, David.
We just hear from the pits there's a likelihood it'll be stopped in the next lap or 2. See if it comes out this time round. It doesn't, so we may be expected on the next lap. The thing that has amazed me, David Oxton, is that at 6:30 on a Sunday night that's wet and cold, there's still people in the stands. Quite a number.
Okay, well, we have confirmation, Tony, that the people in the stand are now watching the last lap. And
Yes,
there's
Laurie
flag in
Powell.
Laurie Powell's hand.
Checkered flag now.
6:30 at night. That's certainly amazingly long race for late in the day for a New Zealand Grand Prix.
Well, it is the most important race in New Zealand motor racing, and if you're a public and you're going to watch a good race, then this is the one race in a year that's supposed to mean the most, and that's what it is, and the people are staying here.
What a reward for the mechanics for Ross Cheever. They've had a fraught time rebuilding. Hello, there's a car up. No, sorry, I thought it was just swapping ends. In these conditions, it's hard to see. But Cheever, his mechanics have been working furiously for him.
Here's Ross Cheever.
To keep his car going and put it back together. And he's been telling them, I'll win a race, you just give me a car. And this is what he's doing for them right now.
He'll be very happy because Davy Jones won last year, and his teammate, and here he comes to do it this year.
Following the wheel tracks of the car in front of them, they're a little drier than the rest of the circuit. Nicely, safely round on the last one. The checkered flag waiting. There it is, wave forward. Ross Cheever of the United States wins the New Zealand Grand Prix. Second will be Kenny Smith, and third, Jeff MacPherson from the United States. That keeps Ken Smith's points chances alive. And now I think we've almost got a 3-way tie when we work it out.
It will, as we said earlier, it would take an Einstein to work out the championship points at this point, but we would think that probably Kenny Smith is in the lead of the series as it comes to heads.
Kenny Smith is very good at winning championships. He's won the International Series twice before, and wouldn't be surprised to see him take it away a 3rd time.
Suffice it to say that the 3 at the head of the field, that is Davy Jones, Ross Cheever and Ken Smith, are all around equal on the overall point situation. After a day of mayhem here, Ross Cheever has won the New Zealand Grand Prix, the 2nd New Zealand Grand Prix for 1984, the 32nd New Zealand Grand Prix. Ross Cheever of the United States, a young lad just turned 20, on the way up, fresh out of Formula 3, and this will do his chances no end of good when he goes back to Europe and starts looking for sponsors. 2nd place to Ken Smith, and
the closest fought series for many years, and usually the championship has been well and truly won at this stage of the circuit.
Ken Smith's last 3 laps have been 54.2. Davy Jones has slowed on the last one to 55.5, and we understand there is a new lap record. We'll get that confirmed for you in just a moment.
Kenny Smith, very close indeed. I would give him 1 lap and he'll be in the lead. He's able to take the pass Davy Jones at the same pace as he passed Jeff MacPherson and Brett Riley.
Well, this is the dream moment for Ken Smith. He's been saying all series, if only I could get up onto the back of that Davy Jones, I'm sure I could rattle him and get past him. He's been saying that all along.
Talking about being rattled, Davy Jones is looking in his mirrors every second, all the time, and he's very concerned about where Kenny Smith is.
Possibly a slight power advantage up the long back straight for the Davy Jones car, but Kenny closes up under these hairpin turns, and let's look for the brake lock. Is there any brake lock this time? Just a smidgen of brake lock there for Davy, and that's where Kenny closes right up under braking.
Yes, if Kenny gets a good run out of the corner before
Another
that,
one,
he'll
Jones.
pass him there. These two exceptionally close. Good